He's Captain America, the first Avenger, and he's taking on the Nazis.
Congratulations. You just got promoted.
The world is turned upside down with the discovery of another Earth.
You don't know what's out there.
That's why I would go.
And why wait for the Oscars? Our picks for the best movies of the year so far.
Are you ready for Captain America? I'm Ignatiy Vishnevetsky of Movie.com.
And I'm Christy Lemire of the Associated Press. We're starting out this week with yet another comic book superhero who's coming to the big screen in 3D. It's Captain America, the first Avenger. Chris Evans stars as Steve Rogers, a scrawny kid from Brooklyn with dreams of military stardom during World War II. Stanley Tucci plays the scientist who sees something special in him.
Whatever happens, stay who you are. Not just a soldier, but a good man.
You actually did it.
But Captain America isn't the only guy who's juicing. Hugo Weaving plays the former Nazi leader Johann Schmidt, otherwise known as Red Skull.
Captain, we are much alike.
What made you so special?
Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn.
But Captain America also finds some time for romance. Haley Atwell co-stars as Agent Peggy Carter, the only woman with whom he's ever had a prolonged conversation.
What do you think?
Yes, I think it works.
Director Joe Johnston's film feels weighty and substantial, even in 3D, and it has a beautiful sepia-toned Art Deco look about it. The abundant supporting cast includes Tommy Lee Jones as a military leader who is skeptical of Captain America. But this is far more engaging when it's about a scrappy underdog overcoming the odds. That is to say, before little Steve becomes a roided-up monster, and always scratches the surface in trying to examine the perils of premature fame. Still, my thumb is up because it looks great and it moves well.
My thumb is also up. I wasn't really expecting, a 3D superhero movie to remind me of Martin Scorsese's New York, New York, but it kind of does during that World of Tomorrow or something, the fair that they go to. And the cast in this is pretty good as well.
Everyone is great.
Everyone is good. Tommy Lee Jones especially.
I mean, he can do this kind of character in his sleep.
Yeah.
Where he's sort of bemused and condescending and mocking and mean, but he's great at that. He's always funny. This is a movie with some very heady themes, and he provides some humor, which it definitely needs.
And Chris Evans gives, a fair amount of depth to Captain America, who's frankly kind of a corny character. He wears like a suit with the American flag on it.
But he has his little trash can lid.
He has his little trash can lid.
To fight off all the enemies,
But,
yes.
I like the conceit of Captain America starting off as this character who has to sell war bonds and only later becoming a hero because, he feels guilty about the fact that he stands on stage and punches Hitler while people actually fight in a war.
And the effects here are pretty good. From when he's the little scrawny kid to becoming the big bulked up hero that we know, it's pretty seamless.
Good effects. It's a gorgeous looking movie, especially in 3D. Our next film toes the line between being understated and not having all that much to say. In Another Earth, a new planet, which looks identical to our own, is discovered in the solar system. Britt Marling, who co-wrote the screenplay with director Mike Cahill, stars as Rhoda, who crashes her car on the day of the planet's discovery, accidentally killing 2 people. Released from prison 4 years later, she seems to want nothing more than to be left alone, and finds hope in the possibility of traveling to the new planet, which is now called Earth 2. Then she decides to show up at the house of John, the man whose wife and son were killed in the accident. He's played by William Mapother, and he doesn't recognize her, so she lies and tells him that she's a maid going door to door. He hires her to clean his dilapidated home, and the two become close.
She goes to apologize, but she loses her nerve. She lies to him. She thinks she might be able to make his life a little bit better. It was really just a way to survive what I've done.
There are a few things to like about Another Earth, but there is a gaping hole in its center. If you take away the sci-fi hook, the movie becomes a pretty standard indie drama about forgiveness, and not a very good one at that. The less said about the metaphorical blind janitor played by Kumar Pallana, the better.
Yeah, I like this better than you did. My thumb is up, but vaguely. I liked it for a long time. I like that you have these very melodramatic, very tragic events taking place, but the aesthetic is so stripped down and handheld and quite often grainy. I like that contrast. I wish it had stayed a little more nebulous in terms of their relationship, in terms of the way that they help each other. It kind of spells things out and gets way too obvious in ways that made me cringe.
I think it's actually too ambiguous. That's my problem. This could be called ambiguous metaphor, the movie. It's like
musical.
The musical. Everything they do seems to symbolize something theoretically. You have this planet, which is essentially one big ambiguous metaphor in the sky.
Hovering towards us. But Britt Marling, I think, is a star. She is beautiful and natural in a very engaging way. So I
don't
like
think she's given that much to work with.
I liked her. She wrote her own script. Okay, coming up, the best
She
movies.
should get a better writer.
Coming up, the best movies of the year so far. We've got our selection.
But first, here's a look at movies now in theaters.
So we're about halfway through the year, so we wanted to stop and take a look at the best movies of the year so far. My pick for number 5 is a rare animated feature that's not in 3D, and that's Rango. Johnny Depp provides the voice of a pet lizard who's tossed out of his domesticated bliss and into the tiny desert town of Dirt. Rango is beautifully realistic and textured, but it also has a playful, slapsticky sense of humor. Rango is consistently clever, even as it pays tribute to classic films you've seen countless times before, from Chinatown to Apocalypse Now to Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns. But it's so visually dazzling and has such an infectious energy about it, I was just delighted the whole time. My number 4 pick is Bridesmaids. Kristen Wiig is funny and sexy, vulnerable and gutsy as a woman whose life is going wrong in every way. Then she finds out her best friend and only source of happiness, played by Maya Rudolph, is getting married.
What is happening?
So will you be my maid of honor?
Of course I will.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do. No, just whatever. Throw the bachelorette party.
Yeah.
The shower and... Oh my God.
Wiig proves she's a flat-out star here, navigating a series of painfully awkward moments with great creativity and heart. It's a female-centric comedy, but it's really got something for everyone. And that's made it the highest-grossing film yet from producer Judd Apatow, the king of the modern bromance.
My pick for number 5 is a movie that you enjoyed as well as I did. It's 13 Assassins, directed by the great, iconoclastic, and extremely prolific Japanese director Takashi Miike. This is his take on the classic samurai genre. The movie consists of 2 halves. In the first, a samurai assembles a team of warriors to kill an evil lord. The entire second half of the movie is taken up by their showdown, a massive, nearly hour-long battle scene. 13 Assassins is one tightly constructed action movie. The best action film of the year so far, as a matter of fact. But it's Miike's trademark surreal touches, like a character coming back from the dead, for example, and oddball characterizations that really made this fun for me. My number 4 pick is Road to Nowhere, the first feature film in over 20 years to be directed by maverick filmmaker Monty Hellman. Road to Nowhere centers on Laurel, played by Shannon Sossamon, an inexperienced actress who is cast in a true crime drama, which is also called Road to Nowhere. This film within a film structure is so ambiguous that even other characters in the film begin to suspect that Laurel and the woman she's playing are, in fact, the same person.
I don't want to talk to the real Velma Duran. I want to talk to the one who's been prancing around the goddamn state capitol pretending to be Velma Duran.
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, the one I just caught a glimpse of. But enough of a glimpse to know it's really you.
Yes, it's a film about filmmaking, but it's also a film about identity and about how people invent stories for themselves. And it's got a firmer grip on what it's like to live in what we call the digital age. than any other movie I've seen this year, which is surprising considering it's directed by a man in his 70s.
As usual, our picks are very different, but I love 13 Assassins. It's this big, bloody, epic blast, and then Road to Nowhere, beautiful, languid, and mesmerizing, and engaging in a totally different way. My third favorite film of the year so far is the quiet, thoughtful Western Meek's Cutoff. It follows three families who are following a guide along the Oregon Trail in 1845. Bruce Greenwood is cocky and charismatic as Mr. Meek, even though he seems to have gotten them lost. Michelle Williams sees through him.
So that's what you think, that we're lost?
I'd say that seems about the right word for it.
We're not lost. We're not lost, we're just finding our way.
I certainly hope so.
We're gonna make it all right.
Oh, you don't need to patronize me, Mr. Meek.
Director Kelly Reichardt's film is slow going, but attention steadily percolates. Meek's Cutoff is about courage and determination and the power of strong women, but it celebrates these qualities in beautifully subtle ways. My number 2 film of the year so far is Beginners, a deft and delightful romantic comedy. Christopher Plummer plays an elderly man who reveals he's dying of cancer. At the same time, he announces he's gay and finally feels ready to come out of the closet now that his wife of 45 years has died. Ewan McGregor plays his son, who's remembering him in flashbacks.
Well, maybe you should take out a personal ad, where you can explain your situation.
My situation?
Yeah. I mean, you want to be in a relationship and you can't stand one.
That's your fatherly advice. Personal ads.
A lot of people use them. I did.
McGregor and Plummer have a charming natural chemistry, but McGregor also has some lovely moments with Melanie Laurent, with whom he shares a romance that's also just beginning.
I was surprised by how much I liked Beginners. I didn't really like Mike Mills's first film, Thumbsucker, but I really enjoyed this one. But I wasn't as surprised as I am by the fact that you really like Meek's Cutoff.
And why is that?
Well, because I think you tend to dislike slow films.
I don't know. Well, like number 3 pick for you, for example? That's kind of slow.
It is not slow. My number 3 pick is a movie that Christy absolutely loves. It's got a cruise ship, it's got animals and children, and the Odessa Steppes, and Europe, and pratfalls, and puns, and history, and stolen gold, and Patti Smith, and a lot of ideas, and pictures, and sounds. In short, everything a movie really needs, right? It's Film Socialism by Jean-Luc Godard.
La peinture, c'est l'Italie. Tous les voyages de noces se font en Italie. Ce sont les musées italiens. Alors que la peinture allemande de la Renaissance est pour moi quelque chose d'extrêmement passionnant.
Film Socialism is challenging but rewarding. The movie begins on a cruise ship whose passengers serve as a sort of microcosm of Western culture. Then it hones in on an ordinary middle-class French family who run a gas station. Both of these parts, as well as the third section of the film, suggest a broken world and a culture in decay. Sounds pretty despairing, right? But because Godard is fond of contradictions, the movie is as much an ode as it is a eulogy. For sheer filmmaking, this is the boldest movie of the year so far. Like Film Socialism, my number 2 pick juxtaposes a family with history. Though in this case, it's not the history of Europe, it's the history of the whole Earth. Massively ambitious, Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life is part creation myth, part chamber drama. Brad Pitt and Jessica Chastain play the parents of 3 boys growing up in Texas in the 1950s. Malick conveys even the most mundane parts of their life with an approach to shooting, directing, and editing that emphasizes stray, fleeting moments.
So you had to bring up Film Socialism again. Did you go watch it a 5th time
I
to
did.
glean more details from it?
I did. It's even better with an appreciative audience that laughs at the jokes.
I wasn't aware that Film Socialism was a comedy.
It's hilarious. People fall into pools, run into windows.
Wow, that's wacky. But you know what? We do agree on my next film.
Yes.
Your number 2 is actually my number 1. My pick for the year's best film so far is The Tree of Life. Gorgeous and ambitious, tightly controlled yet free-flowing, this is unlike anything you've ever seen before. And yet, it's very much the culmination of everything Terrence Malick has done until now. All 4 features he's made over the past 4 decades. This may sound baffling and self-indulgent, but Malick's imagery is stunning and often dreamlike as he depicts childhood memories in wispy, impressionistic snippets of sight and sound. The Tree of Life is deeply spiritual, but Malick isn't one to preach. Instead, he gives you the sense that he's genuinely asking questions to which the answers may be unknowable. He's putting them out there for himself and for all of us. The Tree of Life is the only movie this year that truly, deeply changed me, and I'm still thinking about it months later.
Literally shows you the creation of its own universe, the evolution of life on it, and its ending, I think, could almost be interpreted as kind of an apocalypse for this universe that really just exists in Malick's head. It is so incredibly ambitious.
It's got dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs are the ultimate symbol of ambition.
But they're okay. They make sense in the context.
Yeah, I mean, we don't agree on much in our top fives, but we, I think, agree more or less on this film.
Very much so.
Well, looking at the other 4 films in my top 5, you're probably noticing a pattern. Art, Western culture, families, ambiguous characters, and probably one of the reasons why my number 1 pick occupies its slot is because it combines all of those things into one movie. My vote for the best film of the year so far is without a doubt Certified Copy, directed by Abbas Kiarostami. It's what you'd call a masterpiece of directing, writing, performance, construction, you name it. Juliette Binoche and the opera singer William Schimmel play the lead roles, 2 people who appear to meet for the first time at the beginning of the film and engage in a flirtatious game where they pretend to be husband and wife over the course of a long afternoon in Tuscany.
J'ai aucune intention de partager cette discussion.
Partager, mais est-ce que tu sais ce que ça veut dire, partager? Tu sais partager, toi?
Allons-y, c'est un peu trop ça.
When we reviewed this film on the show, I was fairly convinced that the Schimmel and Binoche characters were in fact strangers, and that the film wouldn't be as good if they were a married couple pretending to be strangers, as Christy suggested. I'm no longer convinced of that. I've heard enough good theories about both sides, and some other more complicated explanations for their relationship, to understand that it's ultimately irrelevant. It's irrelevant because Kiarostami has constructed Certified Copy in a way that allows many different interpretations, or none, to coexist. Certified Copy is about the way people create meaning, whether it's the characters of the film, who, depending on how you look at it, either invent a marriage or pretend not to know each other, or it's us, the viewers, constructing an explanation for what we see on screen. But it's also about language, loneliness, and the most basic building blocks of human relationships. It's the most moving film I saw this year, and I think regardless of whether the Schimmel and Binoche characters are in fact married or not, I'd actually say that this is the greatest film about marriage made in the 21st century, and maybe the most romantic as well.
Well, I love the ambiguity of their relationship, and yet at the same time, the emotions that they feel and the reactions they have are so real and so relatable. And Juliette Binoche is amazing in this, in like 3 different languages, perfectly.
This is her greatest work, I think. This is an amazing role, and William Schimmel, his first time acting in a film, is really great at doing this character,
Totally
this sort
natural,
of this likable, charming know-it-all. But you're right, the characters are fluid, the relationship is fluid, but yet the emotions and the ideas are so concrete, and that's what I love about this film. That's why I think it's a masterpiece.
Right. And I love all the theories. I love that it keeps you talking about it afterward, and so few films make us do that. What films top Roger's list? Let's go to his office to find out.
My top 6 films for the year so far include 3 films you may not have heard very much about. This is Bill Curtis, speaking for Roger Ebert. So I'm going to start with those. Terry, by Azazel Jacobs, is about an overweight high school student who is a misfit and doesn't care. Terry is played by a talented newcomer named Jacob Wysocki. He's been missing a lot of school days and is called in by the assistant principal, played by John C. Reilly. They develop a relationship based on mutual vulnerability.
Your teachers are telling me you won't participate in the lessons. You've begun to wear pajamas every day. Do you understand, from my perspective, how those things could be categorized as red flags?
They're just comfortable on me.
There are a lot of movies about teenage misfits. Terry is one of the best because it avoids so many of the usual cliches. Next on my top 6 list is Trust, directed by David Schwimmer. Its story of a 14-year-old girl and a predatory pedophile results in repercussions in which rape is only the first tragedy to strike its naive and vulnerable victim. She meets the man, played by Chris Henry Coffey, in an internet chat room. She believes he's an athlete only a few years older than she is. When they meet, she discovers he's middle-aged. She confides in a friend who blabs to the school principal, and that unleashes cruel Facebook gossip about her. which damages her more than the encounter itself.
You're my best friend, and I was worried about you. I was your best friend. Do me a favor and never talk to me again.
Okay, after two high school outsiders, how about a cheerful and heroic photographer in his 80s? A magical documentary named Bill Cunningham, New York, tells the story of a healthy and lively octogenarian who rides his bicycle around Manhattan to photograph what people are wearing. Bill Cunningham doesn't merely go to fashion shows. He photographs real people in real life and publishes his findings on his own page in the Sunday New York Times.
You have to photograph the collections. You have to photograph the women on the street who have bought the things and how they're wearing them. And then you have to go to the evening events. You can't report to the public unless you've seen it all.
My next film is a real charmer for Woody Allen, Midnight in Paris. This is a comic fantasy starring Owen Wilson as an engaged man visiting Paris with a woman who has no sympathy with his desire to live there and write novels. One night, a magical thing happens at the stroke of midnight. He is transported back in time to the 1920s, when Gertrude Stein ruled over a salon whose regulars included Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and Picasso. It is lighthearted, fanciful, and sophisticated, and Owen Wilson evokes just the right note of wonderment and joy.
This is unbelievable. There's no city like this in the world.
You're in love with a fantasy.
I'm in love with you.
The next of my top films is Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life. I find it a breathtaking evocation of how a human life is a tiny speck in the vastness of space and time. Malick seems to begin with the Big Bang itself, the creation of the universe, and then come to a halt in a small Texas town where two parents are raising their three boys.
Don't do like I do. Promise me that. I dreamed of being a great musician. I let myself get sidetracked.
My sixth film is Werner Herzog's Cave of Forgotten Dreams. This haunting documentary is like a message from 32,000 years in the past. Herzog photographs a cave in southern France that contains the oldest cave drawings ever discovered. Part of the charm and impact of a Herzog documentary involves the poetry and urgency in his narrative voice.
The paintings looked so fresh that there were initial doubts about their authenticity. But this picture has a layer of calcite and concretions over it that take thousands of years to grow. This was the first proof that it was not a forgery.
5 of these films have something in common. They are all fascinated by unique individual lives. Too many movies these days are about one-dimensional action heroes who hardly have personalities at all. But all 6 of these films are wonderful and are among the best movies of the year so far.
Thank you so much, Roger. Great picks. And you know, you and I both liked Bill Cunningham, New York very much, as well as, obviously, Tree of Life. Cave of Forgotten Dreams we both liked. And Terry is really good, and it's out nationwide this week, so you can go check it out wherever you are.
Wider. We've got this best of the year thing covered from end to end. You've heard our picks, you've heard Roger's, but what about our youngest contributor, Jackson Murphy?
My 5 best movies of the year so far are Romeo and Juliet. It's original, clever, and has great music.
I'm not delicate.
Which is definitely not delicate.
Unknown, an exciting action thriller that keeps you guessing to the end. Mr. Popper's Penguins, one of the best live-action family films that I've seen in quite a while.
Change, step-o change. Word.
Cars 2, not as good as the original, but still doesn't disappoint.
He's got plenty of fuel. And he's awesome.
And Midnight in Paris, which you don't have to be an adult to enjoy. And many critics and fans are calling Midnight in Paris Woody Allen's comeback film. I can't agree or disagree with that because this was my first Woody Allen film. What I can agree with is that Midnight in Paris is a delight.
I had a private detective follow him. And what happened? I don't know. The detective agency says the detective is missing.
The most important thing to know is that not recognizing all the historical characters Allen tosses together and not getting all the references and inside jokes doesn't prevent you from enjoying the film. Others in the A-list cast include Marion Cotillard and Michael Sheen, who plays Paul, a loudmouth know-it-all who easily could have been standing in line behind Allen at the movie theater in that classic scene in Annie Hall, the first Woody Allen film I watched after seeing Midnight in Paris. This is Allen's most successful movie in 25 years. And if you're a new fan like me, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I'm Jackson Murphy. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jackson.
Okay, recapping the votes on this week's show. 2 thumbs up for Captain America, the First Avenger, and we split on Another Earth. I'm up and Ignatiy is down. That's it for this week. Don't forget that you can join the discussion by following us on Facebook and Twitter and at ebertpresents.com.
Join us next week when we review Cowboys and Aliens with Harrison Ford and Daniel Craig. Plus, we did the best movies of the year so far. This week, we'll be doing the worst movies of the year so far next week. That's right, films that we saw so that you didn't have to. Until then, the balcony is closed. For more reviews and more from Roger's office, visit our website at ebertpresents.com.